Hi there. Today we're going to be making focaccia, which is an Italian bread with lots of olive oil in it. We're going to make it a little bit different because we're going to make a garden focaccia bread. So we're going to decorate it with lots of lovely vegetables and fresh herbs to create a garden scene. We're going to start by making an infused oil. So it's going to have lots of flavour given to it with fresh garlic, herbs and pepper. So first of all, you need 3 cloves of garlic. This is a bulb, so you need to divide the bulb up, and these are cloves. Okay, so you need 3 of these, and you need to peel them, take the outer skin off to start with. You need to chop the base of the garlic clove off and the top of the garlic clove off, peel it, and then you're going to chop it finely. You may well have a garlic crusher at home which you could use, which would save you a bit of time, but if you haven't, use a knife, but very, very carefully crush the garlic. Okay, and then you can chop it using the claw method into lots of little pieces. But if you have got a garlic crusher at home, it would be much easier for you to do this. The next thing you do is you're going to prepare some herbs, and again this is going to infuse the oil with lots of flavour. I've got some marjoram and I've also got some fresh rosemary. If you don't have access to fresh herbs, you can use just basic mixed herbs or dried thyme or dried rosemary. Okay, so if you were using fresh herbs, all you have to do is strip the leaves off the herbs, if they're soft ones like these. If they are firmer, like the rosemary, again just pick off the little leaves off the main stems, because sometimes the main stems can be a little bit hard. Okay, and once you need a tablespoon of fresh herbs or 1 teaspoon of dried. And again, just chop them very finely using the claw method. You can also do this method too, and you may have a special knife at home which you can rock backwards and forwards to chop the herbs up. Okay, so keep your hand flat on the top of the knife, okay, and work your way around. To make the oil, you will need 120 millilitres of olive oil. You could use ordinary olive oil or extra virgin olive oil. You're going to need 3 of those chopped up cloves of garlic, which I showed you earlier, and 1 tablespoon of fresh herbs or 1 teaspoon of dried herbs, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. So into a frying pan, you're going to put your oil. So we haven't applied any heat yet. Your garlic. Your fresh herbs. And your pepper. And you're going to cook this on a gentle heat until it just starts to sizzle. So you're going to have to keep a really close eye on this. Okay, so it is literally going to take just a couple of minutes, and then you're going to take it off the heat. So we don't want it too high because the garlic will burn and it will start to taste bitter. Okay, and obviously we've got to be careful because we don't want it catching fire. Okay, so keep a really close eye on it, stay with it. So you can see now there are tiny little bubbles on top, and this is sizzling, and that's all you have to do. Turn the heat off now and move carefully to one side, okay, to cool. The next stage, you're going to add strong plain flour to a mixing bowl. To that, you're going to add a little packet, a sachet of fast acting yeast. So there are 7 grams in each packet. So put that to one side of the bowl on top of the flour. In the other half of the bowl, you're going to add a teaspoon of salt, and you're going to keep this on the opposite side of the bowl to the yeast because salt can kill the yeast. Okay, you're then going to measure out in a measuring jug 150 millilitres of cold water, and then you're going to make it up to 235 with boiling water. So it is tepid, it's warm, and that's what the yeast likes. If it's too hot, it will kill the yeast, and if it's too cold, the yeast will activate eventually, but it will take longer to make the bread. Okay, so you're going to make right, to the water, before you add it to the flour, you're going to add some food for the yeast. So you could use half a teaspoon of honey or sugar. Okay, so add that to there and give it a little stir just to dissolve it. So this is particularly important if it's honey, because honey's sticky. Okay, make a well in the middle of the flour. To your water and sugar solution, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of your infused oil, and this will be cool now. So into the flour, the yeast and the salt, you're going to make a well in the middle, and you're going to start adding your oily water a little bit at a time, and keep stirring in between each addition. Tip your dough out onto a lightly floured work surface. And then we're going to do a process called kneading. And we're going to do this for 10 minutes. So we're stretching the dough away from us and pulling it back. And during this process, gluten, which is the protein in the flour, is developing. And it's going to create the framework within the dough to capture the carbon dioxide that is produced through fermentation by the yeast. The 2 original proteins in flour before we added the water were glutenin and gliadin. And once the water had been added, it converts the glutenin and gliadin into gluten. If it's a little bit sticky, just add a tiny little bit of flour to it. Okay, don't overdo it because you'll dehydrate your dough. Okay, it's important to knead the dough for 10 minutes. This develops the gluten. And to tell if you've reached that stage, if you press the dough, it should bounce back up again. Okay, if you don't knead it enough, the dough will not be able to hold tiny pockets of carbon dioxide created by the yeast. Kneading also warms and stretches the gluten strands so they are springy and elastic. Okay, so now we're going to pop that into a bowl which is lightly oiled. So oil up the sides of the bowl, pop your dough into there, and then cover with cling film. And then pop the bowl, or leave the bowl somewhere nice and warm for the yeast to start fermentation. Okay, so just on the work surface will be fine. Okay, because the kitchen should be fairly warm by now because you should already have your ovens on. Okay, and we're going to leave that for about an hour until it has doubled in size. Okay, so whilst the dough's been rising and it should be double in size, I've been preparing lots of toppings to go onto the focaccia, and I've also got a baking tray and covered it with some foil. Okay, so before I put the dough onto the tray, I'm just going to use a little bit of my infused oil, which I've just put into a little bowl. Okay, dribble that over the foil, and then just spread it with a pastry brush. And this will stop the breads from sticking. Okay, so if we look at the dough now, it's doubled in size, so remove the cling film and then take it out of the bowl and put it onto the tray. Then using the back of a spoon, start to manipulate the dough out into the shape of the tin. You don't want to go too thin with the dough. Okay. If you haven't got a baking tray like this at home, you could just use a flat tray, maybe a bigger, flatter tray, whatever you've got really. Okay, so once you've got it into the position that you want, you're then ready to start putting your topping ingredients on. Once it's to the shape that you want it, just drizzle a little bit of your oil that you've got left over the top of the dough. And then spread it again with the brush. Okay, and then we're ready to start putting on our topping ingredients. So I've got a selection. I've got red onion, which I've cut vertically to give these sort of really lovely shapes. I've got little cherry tomatoes cut in half, spring onions, I've got some dill, mushrooms, little peppers, some chives, some sage leaves and a few of the herbs that I had from earlier. I've got olives, which I've cut in half, capers, some pumpkin seeds and some cumin seeds, which I thought would look really lovely on top, and I've also got some sea salt flakes. So now is the time to start creating